Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome all of you. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to just do a brief introduction, turn it over to Stephen to give a much deeper introduction. I'm Nick Ledani. For those of you that we haven't met, I'm the president of Oglethorpe University. I'm thrilled to be here. This is my third Rikard Lecture, my second in person. I harken back to the pandemic age. I want to start off by thanking the Rikard family for their steadfast support of the Rikard Lecture Series. We are pleased to be able to bring a wide range of accomplished speakers to engage with our students year after year. The Mack A. Rikard Lecture Series is hosted by the Mack School of Business and introduces students to current issues in business as presented by business and civic leaders. The series was established, you know what year? Who can tell me what year? Stone Age, 1991. That is the Stone Age. 1991, named after Mack A. Rikard, an Oglethorpe alumnus from 1937, honorary recipient of the Athletic Hall of Fame, who's an Athletic Hall of Fame member and emeritus trustee. As many of you know, we approved our strategic plan a little over a year ago, and really helps us move forward as we emerge as a university as both distinctive and distinguished in Atlanta and beyond. And we particularly aspire to do this through a spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship. We're extremely fortunate today to have as our speakers Julien and Kiersten Saunders, who are authors of a book that starts out as Cashing Out. And they're going to talk all about how we can all make money by the end of this day. That's my understanding. So we're so pleased to have you both here today. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to give a much deeper introduction to our speakers. Thanks again for everyone who's here.
Thank you, President Ledani, and thank you so much for your leadership of our beloved university. It really is wonderful to have you here. So welcome, friends, colleagues, and honored guests. The Mack School of Business, we're having a great year, if you can't tell. I think things are going very well. We have a new MBA program we're very excited about. That is pending approval by SAC COC, which we expect to be forthcoming. The new Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. If you haven't had a chance to attend some of the programming of that center, we're very excited about the work that's being led by Dr. Lori Carson. The Student-Led Investment Fund launched a couple of months ago, and we have student investors making live investments into live markets. Very excited about that. That's real money. Enrollment is up. Job placement, internship placement is going very well, so we're having a good year. And we're very excited about today's event. We're excited not only to be able to acknowledge the generous support of the Rikard family with this lecture series, which is always a highlight of the year for the institution. But also, this is a very special year because of the first time we're presenting the Rikard Lecture in connection with a week-long focus on financial literacy that is co-sponsored by the Mack School and the University Library. So I hope you have a chance, if you've attended some of those events, and maybe you can attend some more of those events. It really is a very important skill set to develop in your life in terms of financial literacy. So this year's Rikard Lectures, as you hear, are Julien and Kiersten Saunders. They're the authors of the book that was named the Business Insider Best Personal Finance Book of 2022. They're also the creative minds behind richandregular.com blog, the host and producers of Money on the Table video series, hosts of the Rich and Regular podcast in association with Success Magazine. And the Saunders have used frugal living, real estate, stock market investing, and their online business to build wealth and ultimately achieve financial independence. So we bring a very important message for you today. Their work has been featured, and they have been featured on Good Morning America, the New York Times, Forbes, CBS This Morning, Market Watch, and most enviably the Oprah Winfrey Network. Very excited about it. So please join me in welcoming the 2023 Rikard Lecturers, Julien and Kiersten Saunders.
Thank you. This is so cool. I am so excited to be here. As they mentioned, I'm Julien, this is Kiersten. I love, typically this is where people say I get a little nervous hearing people read my bio, but it's pretty cool when I hear it because I remember when I was sitting in that chair and these were just ideas, and now here we are having brought some of these ideas to life, and it's really, really cool. It still kind of amazes me that we have an opportunity to do this. And so I'm so happy to be here. I do have to give a huge shout out to Stephen. He reached out to us, we had an incredible conversation, he let us know all about the school, everything that the business school is doing, and a little bit about the Rikard Lecture, and so we're so happy to be a part of that. I also want to give a shout out to Samantha Sick, Professor Sick, wherever she is. I had to go and teach into our inbox, because when I saw the email, I was like, why does this sound familiar? And she had actually reached out almost 2 years ago. It's been a 2-year process to kind of get us here. Not that people were actually working to get us here, but you know, things happen. 2 years go by. It's been a crazy time period, right? And so she reached out initially. Stephen helped us to get to close the deal, and so we're so happy to be here to be sharing with you all. I feel like I've been hogging the mic. Really briefly, do you want to say anything or not?
Okay.
All right, she's good. I'm going to give her the microphone at some point, but I do want to go ahead and share a couple of things with you. As you mentioned, we do a lot of things, right? So I actually prefer the term or the phrase entrepreneur. Like that's the one that fits most comfortably with me because it encompasses all of the things that we do. Depending on the day, I appreciate the term creative entrepreneur, right? A storyteller, because that's essentially what we do, and that is what I think is really a key to financial literacy. So I want to talk a little bit about that because as you mentioned, we have our book, Cashing Out. Also, I'm going to brag on myself a little bit. Business Insider noted it as the best overall book for investing in 2023. So really, really excited about that. I'm very proud of that. We have our podcast, as we mentioned. Our podcast is on the cusp of hitting 2 million downloads in 2 years, so we're very happy about that. We also have our video series, Money on the Table, which is where we have a lot of fun. That's basically where we take food television, travel television, and financial literacy, and we mix it all up into a show that we call Money on the Table. And we try to make it all fun, right? Instead of just your typical boring instructor-led, sorry, you know what I mean, instructors out there. But we're trying to make this fun because the reality is we know that money makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And so we realize that being funny, being entertaining, making it, dare I say, fun and sexy even sometimes, can make it a little bit more interesting and make sure that that message gets to more people. So whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's a book, whether it's a podcast, whether it's video, our mission is to inspire better conversations about money. Better conversations about money. So you may be wondering, well, what's wrong with the way that we talk about money today? And I would say a lot. So let's talk about some of the things that we could do better when it comes to talking about money. Well, let's talk about the frequency. We don't talk about money enough, right? We happen to be on the Oprah Winfrey Network. I feel like that was 2 years ago. We were meeting with a couple. There's a reality television show called Love and Marriage Huntsville. Has anyone ever seen that show? Good for you. Good. Good for you.
It's a lot of fighting.
A lot of fighting. A lot of bad things happening there. But we were brought in to talk to these two couples, and they were butting heads, which is pretty typical. They were butting heads. They couldn't get on the same page. And there was one moment where we were asking the couple, like, how often do you talk about money? And the guy steps up and he says, once. And he was like, well, once a month, once a week. He was like, once a marriage. We had the conversation, and that was it, right? And you might think that's extreme, that's crazy, but that's actually one more than a lot of other married couples out there. And it has a lot to do with why so many people are getting separated or divorced, right? Money is arguably the third wheel. It was the third wheel in our relationship, right? And it's one of the reasons why we're so passionate about it. But we also don't talk about money in a way that fits comfortably for us. We like things like really simple and easy to understand labels. How many people have ever heard the phrase spender or saver? How many people think that they're a saver? Come on, put your hands up. Savers, be proud of yourselves. How about spenders? How many of you are proud spenders? Look, I know, that's why I'm here. I'm a spender. But I would argue that all of us are spenders and savers. What happens if you decide to spend or save $50,000 so you can buy your dream car after 2 or 3 years? And then you went and bought your dream car. Are you a spender or are you a saver? You're both. All of us are both. None of us are just spenders or savers, right? So let's get rid of those things, especially when it comes to relationships, because we get that a lot too. One person drags in the other person and says, please help me, because I'm a saver and she's a spender, or the other way around, right? Well, we're all of the above, right? A couple of other things that we do around timing. Let's talk about when we think that we can earn money. Most of us, if you think you're a kid, well, you haven't reached your working years yet. You start working at what age? What age do we accept people start working? 16. What age are you just supposed to retire, which means stop working? All right, and if you start earning money or working after that, it's almost like you get your hands slapped. You're not retired anymore. Or if you're earning money before you're 16, all of a sudden you're like breaking the law, right? Kids earn money all the time. Don't we see them on television earning money? Does anyone know any kids that earn money? My son earns money, right? And that can be really helpful, because the more they earn over their lifetime, guess what? The more they can invest over time, which benefits them, right? So all these different things around money, it's really, really weird the way that we talk about it. It's such a taboo. You go on a first date with someone, and we can talk about all kinds of weird and freaky things, but you shall not talk about money on the first date. Isn't that weird? You're more willing to talk about religion, your beliefs, your preferences, than you are how much money you have, or what your aspirations are, right? And so our goal is to make this more comfortable so that more of us aren't so, we don't get that weird feeling in our tummy when we're talking about money or thinking about it, that we all feel welcome and open talking about it. Because the more we talk about it, the more lessons are unlocked and the better we are at making decisions, which all leads to better and more positive financial outcomes. We talk a lot about that in everything that we do, but especially in our book. And in our book, we break down what we call rules and rituals, right? Rules and rituals, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A rule is a rule. It's something that you must follow. It's something that we believe wholeheartedly in. We believe it's going to be true for the foreseeable future. Things like spend less than you make, right? Doesn't matter what time of the year, what day, doesn't matter. I'm going to stand by that. That's a very important principle. We call those rules. Then there are rituals, but we don't spell them like you may think. There are I-C-H-U-A-L-S, rituals. And we think of that as more so, well, these are just little things, take it or leave it. This is the best advice that you get from your big cousin or mentor, the things that might work for you at different points in your life or may not be relevant to you based on where you are, right? So we include a little bit of both of that, and today we're going to offer 3 or 4, depending on how much time we have, but at least 4, I believe, from that book, rules and rituals that we think are going to be helpful for everyone, regardless of your age, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your major. It doesn't matter what it is. We think it's really important information that we think will equip you for the foreseeable future.
Right. Now it's my turn. All right. Hi everyone, I'm Kiersten. So I'm going to kick us off with our first ritual, which is avoid the progress trap. Now, how many of the students out here also have jobs? How many people split their time between working with classes and vice versa? Great. So when I was your age, I was in the same boat. When I was done with class, I would head to the mall and I was slanging shoes at finish line and socks and cleaners so that I could get that extra little commission. And I did that for several summers, and I finally earned an internship at my favorite store on the planet, Target. And so I spent a summer working for Target. I did a couple of special projects for them, and I got a job offer contingent upon graduation for $40,000 a year. And at that time, it was my dream job. It was a dream salary. I thought it was the end-all be-all. And do you know what I did to celebrate the fact that I was going to be making $40,000 a year? I can't hear y'all. Spent money at Target. I went out and bought myself a brand new $35,000 luxury car, and I leased a very expensive midtown apartment to park in it. That's what I did. I was very excited. I knew I was going to be working nights and weekends and holidays, but I was going to be making $40,000 a year. And in hindsight, I can look back at that and say that's one of my biggest financial mistakes. I'm not going to go into the numbers, but it took me 10 years to pay off that car. I actually ended up paying for it twice because of interest. But I moved on past that. At the time, what I thought was that making money was easier than managing money. And at the time, what I also wanted was things. I wanted things. I believed I deserved things. Now there's this author, Ronald Wright, who has a concept that he describes as the progress trap. And the progress trap is something that societies do where they believe in something for its short-term benefits, but ultimately they create the conditions for their own demise. So take weapons, for example. When weapons were created, they allowed us to hunt better, they allowed us more accessibility to food, it made a lot of things easier in the short term. But in the long term, it created the problems that we're dealing with now, in that weapons threaten human survival. So that brings us back to things. Things, wanting things, feeling like you deserve things. Well, the thing about things, see what I did there? The thing about things is if you fall in love with them, you make yourself very vulnerable to the progress trap. Now, whether you want to call what we're going through in this country a retirement crisis or not, there are a lot of things that have been deemed a crisis. We can add retirement to it if you want to, or we can just think of it as a looming problem. There's a couple of stats that I want to point out. I'm going to grab my notes because I don't want to get these wrong.
I could have touched it for you.
Oh, you could have helped me out.
I could.
Yeah, you could have. All right, so the first stat is around the median retirement account balance. So the median retirement account balance, and this is not the average is way lower, but the median retirement account balance for Americans nearing retirement is $144,000. That's how much they've saved. And I know that can sound like a lot, but when you factor in the expenses that come with aging, when your knee starts to fall apart, or you need expensive medication, or even housing or care, and when you factor in the rising cost of living, $144,000 is not enough money. The second stat, the U.S. has something called the Elder Index. And the Elder Index measures the cost of living for older people who live alone or who live as couples. I'm going to focus on the people who live alone because I think this is an important stat. But half of Americans over 65 who live alone have incomes that are below their respective cost of living. So they make less than it costs to live. And my mother-in-law, Julian's mom, is in that boat. She does not have enough in Social Security and savings to live, so we subsidize her income as financially independent people. She's not alone. Half of Americans in her boat, in her shoes, are in the same boat. So what that means is that instead of only identifying as elder millennials, or just plain millennials, we actually get added to a new generational name, and that is called the sandwich generation. Has anybody heard of the sandwich generation? Good, that's exactly what I would hope has heard the sandwich generation. So the sandwich generation transcends the year that you were born. It describes the half of Americans who are aged 40 to 59 who are financially supporting a child under the age of 18 while also financially supporting a parent who is over the age of 65. So you are the meat in the sandwich. You are the middle, right? So what does all this mean? I'm going to sum it up. Let's make sense of it all. It means that half of us have not saved enough for retirement. It means over half of our elders don't have enough. And those of us who are young and healthy enough to still be working have to financially support the ones that don't, and are putting ourselves in a position where we need our children to support us because we can't save while we're supporting the sandwich. So there's several things that we can do about it. The first of which is to be civically engaged, to make sure that you understand what policies are being created or not being created to support an aging population. The second thing is to throw away outdated rules of thumb. We cannot understate how much outdated rules of thumb have put us in this position. Now, when you all were coming up, when you were young, or maybe even now, what is the standard amount that people tell you to set aside in your paycheck for savings or investing? Any guesses? 15%. 15%?
I was gonna say 10.
10, that's the most common one. Any other guesses? Yeah?
My parents always told me 25.
25, that's it. That's our recommendation as well, 25%. 25% of your income should be set aside for either saving, investing, a combination of both. And I know that sounds like a lot. I know it sounds extreme. But what we can learn from the stats that I just told you is that 10%, 15% isn't gonna cut it. You gotta amp it up a little bit. And you can let that 25% savings goal inform the types of jobs that you're looking for, the types of side hustles that you're starting, the types of skills that you're building for the future. That 25% should be deep in your mind. Now, the third thing that you should do is learn to live below your means. And not just live below your means, love to live below your means. I get it. The big car, big house, or big cars. Some people like big cars. The big house, the expensive vacations, eating at the trendiest restaurants, that may come later in life. But you should spend the majority of your early working years all the way up until your peak earning years falling in love with a decently sized, reasonably priced house, driving a reliable car, learning to enjoy hikes and road trips, learning to cook at home. Because I promise you, in 10 to 15 years, you will not worry about the things that you didn't buy because you'll have a totally different definition for what financial success looks like.
I love it. All right, let's move on to the second tip, or key, or rule, or ritual, whatever works for you. It's invest on your own. Now, I'm sure all of us have heard the importance of investing, but I want to focus a little bit on the last part, which is your own. So when we talk about investing, most people are investing in what are called employee-sponsored plans. What I mean by that are things like 401k accounts, 403b accounts, or 457 accounts, right? All of these weird numbers, right? How many people have heard of any of these types of accounts, right? They're great accounts, right? We've had them. We love them. Here's the thing. They are employee-sponsored plans, right? And what that does is it locks us into thinking that we invest almost like as a benefit, as an extension of our association with our employer. And it's great when you do it, but what happens when things change, right? And it also conditions you to think that, well, you know, I'm gonna wait until I get that big job, until I get that big promotion to now start taking advantage of this benefit, as opposed to believing that you can invest on your own, whether or not you're employed or not, and that you have control over your ability to invest, whether or not you are employed or not. And most people never quite get there. They think that investing is something that they do in this employee program that they have, and when they're not employed, they don't invest. And that's not true. You can invest on your own. And I want to tell you why that's important, because when you invest on your own, you are taking control of your financial destiny, irrespective of what's happening, or irrespective of what's happening with your employment, right? So let's think about why that's important. And I think it's important because it creates what I call a reference point in your brain. And sometimes that reference point is also in your heart. It's an emotional thing. You know what it feels like when you're taking your money and putting it into something, $5,000, $10,000. You never forget that, most people, because that's a lot of money, right? I want you to think about it a little differently. And this is why I think reference points are so important. I'm going to age myself, but that's okay, because I suspect there are a couple people who are older than I am. It's okay. How many people here were born in the 80s? I was born in the 80s. All right. Tell me, generational, right? Like there are things that just define your generation. Name a couple of those things. Musicians, athletes.
Well, I'm going to fail this. I wasn't allowed to experience culture.
She's copping out. She's copping out because she doesn't want to age herself. Give me another 80s baby. Come on, 80s babies. Where are you? Goonies. Absolutely iconic movie. You will never forget it. What's the line from Goonies? Somebody tell me. Hey, you guys, right? All right, 90s babies. Any 90s babies here? Anyone born in the 90s? Man,
Spice Girls.
Spice Girls. Name a song of Spice Girls.
If you want to be my lover.
Oh, and you know the whole chorus. In fact, I wouldn't be willing to bet that half the people here know the chorus is in their head. But you know the lyrics. You haven't heard the song in 20 years, but it's burned into your brain. These are cultural reference points. You'll never forget the first time you heard that song. What about something else? Any athletes or anyone born in the 2000s? Shirley. Talk to me, 2000s babies. What's your favorite song as you were coming up? It defined your generation.
One Direction.
One Direction. All right, see, I'm an 80s baby, so I'm thinking New Kids on the Block, NSYNC maybe, but you know, they came before time. Let's go back a little bit. This will be my last example. 70s. Anyone born in the 70s? Talk to me about the 70s. Lots happened in the 70s.
Well, there was disco, man.
Disco, right? But you remember these things, right? And some of these things are bad. Some of these reference points are bad. When I ask my parents, they say things like they remember JFK. I remember when I was in college. I remember 9/11. I'll never forget it, right? These are cultural reference points. They are burned into our minds. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to ask everyone the same question from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. 80s, what was the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the 1980s? 90s. Does anyone know what the Dow Jones Industrial Average may have been, even though it was on the news every single day? It was in the newspaper every single day. Throw out a number. What was the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the 80s? How about the 90s?
6,000.
Roughly, yeah? Okay? I think you get the point here. This is what talking about money does. This is what being engaged with your money does. When you take action, when you spend money on that card and you never forget it, when you take action and you buy that first home, you will never forget it. You will never forget when you spend all of your summer earnings money to go see your favorite musician. You will remember that till the day you pass away. And that's what I want you to do with your money and think about it. Okay? So when you invest on your own, not just through your employers, it doesn't matter. It could be summer, it could be the summer off, it could be while you're on vacation, it could be while you're unemployed. You are still making a deliberate, personal, and intimate decision to invest. And I'm telling you, you will never forget it, just like you will never forget the lyrics to If You Want to Be My Lover, or One Direction, or I'm just going to say Aerosmith, because you look like an Aerosmith fan. Maybe not. I was a big fan of Aerosmith. You know, right? It was the 80s. Things happened. But this is the point that we're making, right? It's about creating that reference point. Okay, so you get over that hump. You've done it yourself. Now what's the next thing that happens? All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to invest. Now it's like, all right, now I have to make sense of investing. Like, this is weird, right? I'm intentional. I read that book, and I'm ready to take action. Now I need to make sense of all of these feelings and all of this intention. And now it's like another obstacle kicks in, making sense of it all, literacy. Okay, so let's talk about that, because I'm willing to bet that actually you know more about investing than you're likely giving yourself credit for. Okay? Anyone here like sports? Only one person, 2 people, 3 people like sports? That's impossible. There's a baseball field right there. Surely more of you like sports. Can we use basketball as an example? What sport do you want me to use? Not tennis. I don't understand the rules of tennis. Team sports. Give me a team sport. Baseball. My son's into baseball. I'm falling back on the baseball right now. It's a very good feeling. The season just started. Who's projected to win the World Series this year? Anyone?
The Braves.
The Braves. Who else is projected to win the World Series? Astros. Houston Astros. Anyone else? Yes, right. Name your team. You know you want to name your team, right? You turn on ESPN, and you've got 5 people doing what? Predicting the future. Talking about who's going to win. Some of them are using boatloads of really fancy data to inform their opinions. But at the end of the day, they're making what I call educated guesses. So let's change the channel. Let's go from ESPN, and let's go to what other channel am I thinking of? CNBC. And what do we see? The exact same thing, just a different topic. A bunch of media personalities making educated guesses in their best attempt to predict the future. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine that you're watching ESPN. It doesn't matter. It's just entertainment. Take it with a grain of salt and throw it all out. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter if the Yankees win or if the Houston Astros win or the Atlanta Braves or the Milwaukee Brewers. It took me a second because I was thinking basketball. It doesn't matter. I want you to more so focus on whether or not you believe more people will be watching and playing baseball 30 years from now. How many people think that people will be watching and playing baseball 30 years from now? How many of you think people will be watching and playing baseball 40 years from now, 50 years from now? Do you think baseball will just completely disappear and not be relevant? It's not going to happen. It's a part of American culture. And so is the stock market. It is the heart of American culture. So instead of trying to guess, maybe we weren't talking about the Braves, maybe we weren't talking about the Astros, maybe we were talking about Tesla or Amazon or Walmart or some other fancy company that you've never even heard of. It doesn't matter. Don't waste your time trying to pick or even believing that you can pick, because you're no different than Stephen A. Smith, who gets paid a lot of money to make educated guesses. But guess what? Stephen A. Smith is no different than, who's the other guy that slams the red button? Jim Cramer. She's smart. Jim Cramer. They're all making educated guesses to keep us entertaining and to make guessing, or what some people call gambling, entertaining. But I'm telling you, there's a proven tactic, one that we recommend, passive investing, which ignores all of that stuff and says, I'm not going to try to pick, I'm going to assume that the US economy, that the global economy will continue trucking along 30 to 40, 50 years from now. So that's how I want you to think about it. And the way that you do that is called index fund investing, okay? And I'm gonna use as few words as possible to describe that, but it's called index fund investing. How many people here have heard of index fund investing? Fantastic. Maybe I should ask you to explain it. But I'll give you the way that I explain it, right? It's very similar to what I just said. Instead of picking a company, you decide to track the market. Instead of trying to beat the market, instead of trying to be the one great team that's gonna win it all, or the one company that's gonna win it all, you bet on it all, right? It's simple, it's proven, and you all, since you've been nodding your head, have proven that you understand it, right? So we have the intention done, we've checked that box earlier, and now we understand it. Now we should be a little bit more motivated to do it, but let's talk numbers. Let's make up a number, $10,000. And for some people, that's a lot of money. For others, it's not so much, but $10,000. I feel like that's a number that is like right-sized enough. Some of us people are like, you know what, I can make that happen. I will make it happen. I joke all the time that you can be the worst entrepreneur in the world and make $10,000. That's the beauty of America. But I think you can do that. I believe that. Let's say we all did that. You earned $10,000. You invested in a total stock market index fund. You do exactly what you all understand to do. 10 years from now, that $10,000 turns into around $25,000. In 20 years, that same $10,000 turns into, I believe, just under $50,000. She's looking at my notes.
73.
73. In 3 years, that same $10,000 turns into $198,000.
30 years though.
In 30 years?
Yeah.
And in 40 years, that same $10,000 compounding over 40 years turns into 537 or 73. I always get the numbers mixed up.
37.
$537,000, 40 years. Now let's say you wanted to get frisky and said, you know what, that's not enough for me. I want to be a home run hitter. Great. Find $10,000, you treat it like a seed, you plant it in the stock market, and you let time be the rain, the water, and the sun. You let it grow for 40 years, and every single year, you pour on another $1,000, right? So you find $10,000, next year you put $1,000, next year you put another $1,000, and you do that for 40 more years. How much money do you think you'll have after 40 years? Anyone? Anyone? There is a wrong answer, but anyone. The answer is just a little bit over, just right around $1 million, right? $10,000, $1,000 on an annual basis over a 40-year period turns into $1 million. How many people here would like to have an extra $1 million? Yeah, every single one of us can do that, right? I believe that, I really, really do. You're here for a reason. All of you are incredibly competent and smart people. I think we can do that. And so that's investing. In a nutshell, I truly believe that it can be just that simple, but so many of us are so stuck because of TV and media and all these other flashy examples of what investing looks like. We've completely overcomplicated it. We've made it entertaining to our detriment, and it keeps us moving and guessing and second guessing what we already know to be true. So there are a couple of things before I round this out and pass it on to the next point. One, don't overcomplicate it, right? Time in the market, we just did the math. 10,000 plus 1,000 over 40 years. Don't overcomplicate it, keep it simple. Two, I don't remember my second point. What's my second point?
Your second point, don't wait for the dream job.
Don't wait for the dream job. We get that a lot too. You wait. Remember, time. Time is what you want. It's not about intelligence, but don't wait for the dream job. Don't wait for the big promotion. Time is going to be far more important than anything. And the third thing is this number, and I want you to write it down. 33, 388. Okay? That's the Dow Jones Industrial Average today. 33388. 40 years from now, it's not going to be that. I can assure you. Now, if you need another cultural reference point, just turn on the news. There's something crazy happening in New York right now. Maybe it's LSU. But let this be your cultural moment. Let this be the thing that you imprint into your mind. Let this be the thing. I remember the day LSU won the championship. I remember the day UConn won the championship. I remember the day a former president was indicted. Let this be the cultural moment and just add a little note to it. 33388. Okay?
I could have said boom. Like she did, but I'm a gentleman.
Too long. All right, so your third financial key is to avoid the 4-letter F word. Not food, not funk, not the one you're thinking, but fees. Fees. And the reason I want to talk about fees is because despite what Julien just said about how we tend to overcomplicate it, I know that in between all of the polite nods and the giggles that you all are giving us, I know that someone out there is overthinking this. Not because you're not smart enough. It's actually because you're too smart. You're smart enough to overthink this thing. And I am telling you that becoming a good investor has nothing to do with your intellect. It has to do with two things: fees and courage. Avoiding fees and finding courage. So I want to talk about fees because all of us, all animals, including mammals, including us, are born what's called a numerical instinct. It is this draw to things like numbers. If you take counting, for example, back when we were ancestors and cavemen, the ability to determine a large amount of food from a small amount of food was key to our survival. And so we are biologically wired to pay attention to numbers, particularly numbers that are big. But the challenge is when it comes to investing and the fees in your retirement accounts or your investment accounts, those numbers are typically single-digit numbers. And because 1% is closer to 0 than it is 100, we feel like we don't have to worry about it. It's small. But 1% compounded over time is anything but small. It's anything but small. It reminds me of high fructose corn syrup. How many people have ever had a goal to get better with their eating habits and become healthier? Almost everybody, right? So you get in the groove, you write your meal plan, you head to the store, and you look at a number of things that are now labeled healthy, organic, whatever it is. But the problem is, in our food system, there's a hidden ingredient in our food that actively works against your goals. It's high fructose corn syrup. That's one of them. There are several. But it's high fructose corn syrup. And the only way to know that what you're buying contains high fructose corn syrup is you gotta flip it over, you gotta look at the ingredients, and you gotta take that extra step. The same is true with investing. The hidden ingredient in investing is called an expense ratio. Now, an expense ratio is a measurement of how much of a fund's assets, your deposits, your investments, are spent towards operating expenses, administrative expenses, things like Wall Street bonuses. It measures how much of your money is spent towards those things. And the way that you find it, companies are required to disclose it, thanks to our governance and regulation policies. They're required to disclose it, and the way that you find it is any of the ticker symbols on your mutual funds or your index funds. You simply Google your ticker symbol plus expense ratios, and it'll come right up. It's usually the first result. The other thing that you can do is once you're invested, your funds are required to send you what's called a prospectus, which is basically an annual report, and they will tell you exactly how the funds performed, and in that prospectus, typically towards the back, is the expense ratio. Now, I'm going to walk you through an example, and I have to do notes because he's not going to shout out the number like I do for him. All right. So going back to the $10,000 example, let's assume that you invested $10,000 in a mutual fund within your retirement account that has a 1% expense ratio. And you allow that money to compound over 40 years. You don't add an extra seasoning, you don't dip another $1,000 in it. you should do a one-time deposit of $10,000 over 40 years. Now, your account is a little more conservative than the ones that Julien just laid out, but assuming an annual rate of return at 7%, your initial $10,000 investment would grow into a gross value of just under $150,000. Now that is the magic of compound interest. That money made more money overnight without you touching it than you did on your own. Now the problem is, $150,000 is not the amount that you would actually have in your account. You'd actually only have $102,000, with $48,000 over a third of your investments going to fees. That is what 1% does. And oh, by the way, this is before taxes come out. So you thought you would have 150, you actually have 102, and you still owe the government taxes because you put it in a tax advantage retirement account. Now let's say you have a twin, a wonderful twin, who does the exact same thing. They take their $10,000, except instead of putting it in a mutual fund that has a 1% expense ratio, they decide to invest in an index fund that has a 0.04% expense ratio. Over the same 40-year period, your twin has $148,000 and only pays a little over $2,000 in fees. So the twin is sitting pretty. Hopefully y'all get along and they're willing to loan you a little something. That's the difference between index funds and actively managed mutual funds. Total stock market funds are the cornerstone of our investment strategy. They are affordable, they're diversified, they're balanced, and they're proven. They're the kind of fund that you would want to bring home to your mom, right? These are the things that we recommend because it's never been easier to get them. You can use a brokerage like Ally, Vanguard, Fidelity. All of these companies have mobile apps, so at this point, investing is as simple as creating a Spotify playlist or a Bumble profile or whatever the dating app is these days. Or you can use robo-advisors like Betterment and Acorns, which make impulse investing, the ability to invest while you spend and connect your investing to your spending through roundup apps more accessible. Now doing this enables two different things. The first one is that it allows you to aim for a 15-year career. Now most people don't think about how long their career should be. They hope and they pray for a long and successful one, and then they kind of just go through the motions until death or retirement. But if you were to ask us to put a time stamp on how long a career should be, our answer is 15 years. That's it. But does that mean you stop working and sip pina coladas after 15 years? No. Does that mean you never do another meaningful thing after 15 years or earn money after 15 years? No. But if you can wrap your head around a focused time of 4 years for a college degree that prepares you with enough education for a discipline to go out and contribute to the corporate world, then you can wrap your head around a focused 15 years on investing, learning skills, and creating plans for life after work, and how that may open up how you choose to contribute to the world. So Julien's gonna walk us through what the 15-year career looks like.
All right, 15-year career. This is actually a chapter in our book. So years 1 through 5. You just graduated from college, you're out there in the workforce, you're earning money. First thing I want you to do is likely exactly what you're doing right now, is to continue to live like a college student. Live well below your means. Pretend like the money isn't coming in. Do not go buy a luxury car and a fancy apartment in Midtown Connecticut. Do not do that. Live well below your means and take all of that surplus income and use it to pay off as much debt as you can, right? We know that's a big, big issue. So pay off as much debt, hopefully all of the debt that you can from years 1 through 5. And obviously you want to find the best job. You want to earn as much money as you can, but that's years 1 through 5. It's boring, it can be painful, we've been there, but focused efforts on making sure that you get to debt freedom as quickly as possible is going to be one of the most important things you ever do. Years 6 through 10. Now we're cooking with grease. Things are heating up, you got 5 years experience under your belt, you're out there, you get the job, you're earning a little bit more money, and this is where Julien comes in and says continue to spend less than you're actually earning. Now I'm not saying you can't splurge every now and then. it. You deserve it. Treat yourself in something, right? But don't blow it all. Don't buy up. Don't buy the fancy car. Don't buy the big house either. Continue to live below your means, right? This way, assuming your debt is paid off in years 1 through 5, all of the money that went to pay off the debt can go into investing at a significantly higher rate. This is how you get to that 25% goal that your grandmother was talking about. Most people struggle with that because they buy into the lifestyle that doesn't allow them to save more than 10 or 15%, right? The national savings rate, if I'm not mistaken, is somewhere, it hit its peak during the pandemic, but the average is somewhere around 3 to 4%, right? It contributes to why we're in the situation that we're in, right? Even people who earn hundreds of thousands of dollars struggle with saving money, right? Because we buy into really expensive lifestyles. So years 6 through 10, continue to live below your means, invest at a higher rate, but on the job, I really want you to do what we call find your superpower. And you may have several superpowers. Whatever that thing is that makes you special, that's getting you promoted, double down on that thing and find maybe 2 other things that you can do. And then I want you to find the highest bidder for those skills, right? That's the system that we live in. So that's years 6 through 10. Live below your means, reallocate the money that you were spending or putting towards paying off your debt in years 1 through 5, and use that to invest at a higher rate in years 6 through 10. If you get a raise, pretend like you didn't get a raise. Take that money and continue to invest. It'll make sense in year 16, right? So now we're in years 11. Now we're really high. We've got 10 years of work experience. Maybe we got that big promotion, and now we can comfortably actually afford to buy the things that we've really been looking forward to without disrupting our savings. Maybe we're actually able to take our savings to the next level. You want to be one of those few people who actually are able to invest more than what your 401k, 403b, or 457 account allows you to do. So years 11 through 15, you're continuing to invest in, continuing to invest, doing more of the same. But what are we doing with those superpowers? Well, we're trying to get that big job, and we're monetizing that thing. We're finding as many buyers for that particular skill. And who are those buyers? It could be that you're an entrepreneur. It could be that you create a product or a service and you're selling something, right? I know that's really hard for some of us to do. The idea of selling something makes us feel weird, but we do it all the time. Every single one of us have sold our expertise. That's what we do. That's what a job is, right? Find several other buyers, though. That's what many of us get caught up. You find one employer, one person who's willing to set a price for our skills, and that's all we go to. But in today's world, people are finding more and more opportunities to sell and monetize their skill sets. It could be that you create a product, a service. It could be that you find an entrepreneur who needs help, and you lend them your services in exchange for a fee. It could be that you become a real estate investor. It could be any number of things. It has literally never been easier to make money than it is today, especially in the world of the internet, right? So now after 15 years, we've got presumably 10 years of debt freedom behind us, 15 years of experience. We've used that last 5 years to really pressure test how much we can earn with these superpowers in addition to our traditional job. Fun fact, I'm pretty sure it was Washington Post or New York Times just did an article about this. 50% of people earning over $100,000 have a side gig today. It's completely normal. It's not niche anymore. Part of it is out of necessity, but it's also because people realize that this is possible, that this is the world that we live in, right? And so when you're done with this 15 years, especially if you walked into it with minimal debt or you were able to pay off that debt earlier, now you've got a decade of investing, a decade of compounding behind you, more than a decade of skills and discipline and a strong foundation of finance behind you, and you are able to do what we call cash out. You're able to walk away for any reason. It doesn't have to be an elaborate reason. It could be what we all call adulting. It could be that you have a sick parent that you need to pay more time and attention to. It could be that you're just bored with that job. It doesn't challenge you the way that it did 15 years before. It could be that you got a bad manager, a bad boss. It could be that the times are changing. For any reason, at any time, you have now put yourself in a position to walk away on your own terms and with your dignity and financial foundation intact. And I think that's the goal for the vast majority of people. It's not to make a bunch of money so that you can, like she said, sip pina coladas on the beach. That stuff's cool, but guess what? That stuff gets boring too. I'll give you a better reason for why you would want to do this. And I'm going to take you back to the 1960s. I wasn't alive then, but I read about it. Ouch. I heard. In all seriousness, 1960s, I want to tell you a little story about Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was arrested, one of several times that he was arrested. I believe it was him, Ralph Abernathy, and Andrew Young. They were protesting. They were wrongfully put in jail, and they were supposed to spend a week in jail. The bail was $78, and which sounds crazy, right? But it was the 1960s, $78. And being men of principle that they were, they decided that they did not want to pay the fee. They were going to do the time. 3 days went by, and an anonymous donor bailed them out. They were able to go free, go back to doing the business that they were doing. Now, some people hear that story and they say, wow, that's really good. It's great that there's somewhere, that there were good people out there who were willing to get them out of jail. The question that I ask as a personal finance enthusiast is, who could afford $78? Because in today's money, that's around $1,500. And we know that around 50% of people cannot afford a sudden influx of $1,500 without putting it on a credit card. So I believe that being the anonymous donor is a far better reason for building wealth than just the ability to buy things and more things on top of it. You have the ability to shape the world around you. You have this ability to get back to your school and your university or any institution that helped to improve your quality of life. You have the ability to change the world, but that requires funding. Movements require funding. And so that should be, I think, one of the better reasons, and if not the best reason, for building wealth. And so I hope that this conversation was a memorable one for you. I hate to end on a pop quiz, but somebody tell me, what is the Dow Jones Industrial Average? 3-3. Thank you very much, guys. We appreciate your time. I believe we're going to take questions, if there are any. And we love questions. I'd be happy to do it. Yes?
What are your thoughts on the fire movement?
What are my thoughts on the FIRE movement? The FIRE movement is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And I meant to say this at the beginning of our talk, or maybe I did mention it, but again, I have to give kudos to Samantha and Stephen because it is in some circles a controversial topic. And I can tell you as someone who does a lot of talking to with groups, especially organizations, they don't like bringing people in who are FIRE people because they feel like we're implanting these ideas of getting into the workforce and quitting your jobs in 15 years. They feel like that's a bit of a threat to them. But these guys are open to the realities of the world that we're in and the urgency, I believe, of the world that we're in. So all of that to say, I'm a huge fan of the financial independence movement. And it is basically a movement of people who are doing exactly what we did. They are reimagining what personal finance looks like. They are living dramatically below their means. They are investing significantly. You know, people talk about 15 or 20%. People in the FIRE movement are well known for saving 50 to 75% of their income. They do that over 10 to 15 years, and we all did the math. We know what happens when you do that. You have options. That's all it's about. You have options. Some of them stay at their jobs, and I believe they become better workers. Why? Because they're committed to doing the work. They're not there because they just want the promotion. They're not just there because they're bored. They're there because they're truly passionate about the work. And so I believe the FIRE movement is an incredible opportunity for people. And I also will say that if this was, what, 20 years, not even 20 years ago, if this were 10 years from now, and this wasn't about money, and we were talking about nutrition, and someone brought up veganism, you would laugh at them and make some flippant joke about rabbit food. But look at where we are today. We have a fundamentally different and better understanding of nutrition. It's normal. And so I believe that's the trajectory of this movement, where people will be thinking about the length of their careers and the way that they invest, and a lot of that credit will be due to the FIRE movement. So that's what I think of the FIRE movement. And I think my wife agrees.
Yes, and I have a book for you for being courageous and asking the first question.
Another question.
So I was gonna ask like how to get rich like tomorrow, but that's not. I wanted to know what is better, a 401k or an IRA? I was thinking about, taking $50 a week through the month and just investing that into like a IRA and like, 60, be like a millionaire or something. But which is better?
It's hard to answer. Do you have a match on your 401k? Okay, find that out. So if you have a match, which is what a lot of employers will offer as an incentive for their employees to participate in the 401k, it's free money. It's 100% return on any investment that you make, which doesn't typically exist in free market systems. So if you have a match, you should absolutely invest in your 401k to get a match. But the broader question around 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, this gets people caught up a lot, but that's really just the holder of your account. Think of it like you would a purse. Like, is it better to have a black leather purse or a brown leather purse? Doesn't really matter. There's some tax benefits associated with them. There are different restrictions around income associated with each of them. But what's more meaningful is the funds that you're investing within your 401k or your IRA. So for those funds, I would say follow the advice that we gave, pay attention to expense ratios and be consistent over time, and you can't really lose that way. Thank you for asking the question. I'll for you too.
Yes.
So you guys have kind of been working on this plan for a while. So that's kind of like, based off what you know and talking about how people use the past to predict the future, what do you see coming in the next 5 to 10 years for people like us?
For people like us, people like me, everything that we hear about now. I was just having this conversation with your dean before we started. I'm old enough to remember when many of the things that we're experiencing today were labeled as coming soon. And, I was flippantly making a joke because we recorded a podcast about collectibles, and I happen to have a rookie card for Shaquille O'Neal. I remember when he was a rookie. Now he's retired and he's an announcer. I remember when, I forget the other example we were using, but all of the things that they said were going to happen. I'm sorry? McDonald's. I remember a world where McDonald's was the staple of fast food companies, like they were infallible. And now, as of yesterday, they're in turmoil after a decade of trying to stay afloat because they didn't innovate, right? And so what I see happening are all of the things that all of the studies have said. Technology and the pace of change is fundamentally changing the world that we live in. And from an investing standpoint, you get an opportunity to benefit from that. Here's the way that I look at it. Whether or not you consider yourself a tech genius or not, you don't have to go back to, you don't have to be a tech genius to capitalize on it. You don't have to build a rocket ship, but you can buy a tiny slice of the rocket ship because it's going to change our world regardless of what we do. And so this is one of the other reasons why you should be investing. Technology stocks right now account for about 30% of a total stock market index fund because that's how much of the market it represents. Right? It's a huge number. It is the driver of growth. And so I foresee technology continuing to grow faster, and continuing to be a part of our everyday way of life. Any other questions? Simpler questions, maybe? That don't require me to predict the future?
Say what? I did. I worked for Target. I worked for Target for 5 years before I switched and did a different career. But I love. It's a great company. It's a great company. They still are a great company.
I have one more question.
Go for it.
So right now, like a big thing that I see from like myself and like other people my age is like I guess the mentality of like hustle culture. Having multiple jobs, working all the time, working kind of sensitively without like a goal, but more towards like the idea of abundance. What do you say about like this kind of general movement towards like entrepreneurship versus like a traditional 9-to-5 and like how hustle culture kind of affects us on day to day?
Excellent question.
That is an excellent question.
Can you
Yeah.
repeat the question? Can you repeat the question?
The question was, how do we feel about hustle culture and the tension between entrepreneurship, full-time job? Where do we stand on that? Yeah, I've noticed the trend towards hustle culture, and I have also noticed the lack of a goal. Like, what is it all for, other than the things that we have learned earlier don't mean as much after several years of reflection. I think the good news about entrepreneurship versus full-time employment is we're at a place where you don't have to pick. Very similar to veganism, where before it was so extreme, where it's like if you were a vegan, it was basically a personality. And now you can choose to be a vegan. It's called flexitarianism, where you can choose to adopt some of these healthy habits. You can choose meatless Mondays. You can choose, to change out your beef patties to something that's plant-based. You can choose to do oat milk or almond milk, whatever it is. You can incorporate these habits into your life without necessarily adopting the label. And the same is true for self-employment. There are lots of different versions of it. There's actually something called dualpreneurship, where you work a full 9 to 5, and then you also have another gig on your own. And the benefit of that is that you don't have the pressure to put on your business to financially support your household. You can do this thing, you can kind of moonlight. Some people call it a side hustle, but a lot of people are actually building real businesses on the backs of their paycheck. And so again, it's just about giving your income and your income earning a purpose. It's about deciding what you want to do against all of this workforce volatility, which exists now at levels that have not existed before. You're more likely to have a disruption in your income now than you were 5 years ago. And so people are starting to adjust for that risk. They're starting to make sure that they have multiple income streams, which has always been the advice, but it hasn't always been as easy to incorporate. You always had to choose, like, if I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, then that means I can't work, and now that's not the case. Yes, ma'am.
No, I don't.
All right, I think that's time.
I know we're hanging out, so we'll be around as well. But thank you again, guys. We really appreciate it.